The Human Sciences Research Council has recently concluded a new study on why people attack foreign nationals living in South Africa. To tell us more about this study, we are joined from our Durban studios by Dr. Stephen Gordon, who is a researcher at the Human Sciences Research Council. Dr. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us on The Globe. Now, why do South Africans attack foreign nationals?
That is a very interesting and yet complicated question. If we look at the public opinion data gathered by the Human Science Research Council, one of the main drivers of anti-immigrant hostility has been the negative stereotypes that are prevalent in our country about the international migrant community. Unfortunately, in South Africa, many people are under the mistaken belief that international migrants are responsible for crime, for unemployment, for poverty, and for the scarce resources that confront many South Africans. These negative stereotypes create a poisoned environment in which violence can all too often spring from.
Now, Doctor, the causes of anti-immigrant violence has been debated since the 1990s without any valid or credible solutions being brought to the forefront. Why is this the case? Why has this debate been going on for so long without any solutions?
Unfortunately, what happens in our country is that whenever an episode of collective anti-immigrant violence erupts, we as commentators, as pundits, as academics, as politicians, rush to find solutions. We debate, and then the moment passes. We lose interest and return to other concerns. And yet, when the violence erupts again, we go back and ask the same questions. Unfortunately, while there has been some political will to address this problem, the size of the political will needed has not matched the demand. We need comprehensive, progressive solutions. Unfortunately, we have a short attention span when it comes to this very important issue.
Doctor, there have been suggestions that xenophobia does not exist. What are the opinions of ordinary South Africans? And in terms of their response, just looking at some of the responses there, you mentioned earlier as well, some of the reasons given as criminal activities by foreigners, immigrants bringing and selling drugs in the country. Those are things that South Africans seemingly feel that foreign nationals are bringing into the country, and they don't want that. In terms of this study, do you think going forward South Africans will have a better understanding of the different types of immigrants that are in the country or foreign nationals that are in the country and the contribution they do make in the economy?
I would like to address that in two parts. So firstly, we have, why do South Africans feel there are attacks against international migrants here in South Africa? Now, we asked a large representative sample of South Africans this important question. What they told us as researchers was that immigrants bring crime, immigrants bring drugs, immigrants bring unemployment. These are the stereotypes that people use to justify anti-immigrant violence. No one told us that this anti-immigrant violence, this xenophobia, does not exist. And in fact, what we see is a recognition of the problem, but the solutions that people identify, the causes people identify, are unfortunately not the right ones. Unfortunately, we in South Africa feel that these attacks are a response to the negative things, as you say, that are brought to this country by foreign nationals. This is, of course, based on unfounded stereotypes about international migration. Scholars will tell you that while international migration might have its costs, overwhelmingly international migration is a positive for a country and can have real economic and social benefits. You raise the issue of education. We as scholars, as activists, as politicians, need to educate the South African people about the benefits of international migration, particularly when entrepreneurs come to our country to start businesses, to bring skills, to help uplift our economy.
Now, earlier on, you mentioned the fact that South Africans are very quick to forget, and that's why there may be a lot of these sporadic attacks that keep happening at different times or different years or different periods in the country. Just looking at some of the research that has come out in the study is that approximately 10% of South Africa's population told field workers that they envy the success or ingenuity of foreigners, and this has caused the kind of hate crime that we are seeing. What's your take on this?
So when we went to people throughout South Africa, we asked them, as I said before, why does this violence against foreigners take place? And a small share, about 10%, told us that it was jealousy, that people felt jealous of the success of international migrants, and this is why some people engaged in violence. Now, this is a very interesting response because it suggests to us that these small people believe that the violence is the result of prejudice, of a misunderstanding of the positive contribution of international migration. And indeed, this is quite a positive response because they are not placing the blame on the international migrants themselves, but rather on the attackers, saying that the attackers need to change their attitudes, their way of seeing the world. And indeed, I hope that more people would adopt a similar attitude. We must recognize that violence is a bad, negative consequence in our country. And when people engage in violence, the cause of that violence is obviously some psychological issue with the individual. They are unable to redress their grievances in an adequate way and therefore need assistance in order to gain redress, rather than turning to violence.
Dr. Gordon, very quickly, just in wrapping up, what can government do to ensure that South Africans are more educated with regards to dealing with the different types of immigrants that are in the country, and to, curb the violence or violent attacks against foreign nationals? Also bearing in mind that a lot of attitude towards the non-threat reasons that were given in your research is that immigrants that are not documented seemingly are involved in crime. How does the government deal with this and ensure that there is a way forward where people can live harmoniously without any issues?
The South African government has devoted a great deal of time and resources to dealing with the real problem of racism in our country. We must devote a similar level of resources, effort, and time to the problem of xenophobia, of anti-immigrant prejudice in our nation. Prejudice is not healthy for social cohesion. We must address prejudices in our country, stereotypes about, take for example, the fact that many people are on the false assumption that international migrants are a major cause of crime. There is no systematic evidence to support this belief. Indeed, let us think of it this way. We don't talk about black crime or white crime, Zulu crime or Xhosa crime, nor should we talk about foreign crime. We must deal with crime as it appears in our country. It is, of course, a serious matter, but again, to use the actions of a few bad actors to label a whole population as criminal or criminal-like is the very definition of prejudice.
Dr. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have run out of time and we'll leave it there for now. That was Dr. Stephen Gordon, researcher at the Human Sciences Research Council, joining us from our Durban studios.